welcome back to the Rangers News YouTube channel. My name is James Black. I'm joined by Jordan Carlisle as we do something a little bit different today. And we have a specific look at how Rangers are going to line up for this weekend's Scottish Premiership clash with Livingston and Ibrox. Now, we're coming right off the back of Thursday night's Europa League win in Liège against Standard. So it's been a pretty hectic few days for Steven Gerrard's side. But with a fairly sizable squad, we might see some changes to personnel. There were 3 changes made in midweek with Leon Balogun, Ryan Jack and Yanis Hadji all coming into the side, with Stephen Davis, Phil Helander and Brandon Barker missing out on Thursday. So those 3 could be ones who come into contention for Sunday's league clash with Gary Holt's side. But we're going to go through the positions one by one and we'll come up with what we think the predicted 11 is going to be on Sunday. So first things first, Jordan. Great win at the week in midweek. Did you see there been many changes first of all, or do you think it will be a fairly similar lineup to what we saw in Belgium?
I think he's probably going to look to try and keep the momentum with sort of a core of the team, and certainly, his favourites, his sort of his go-to men will stay, but I do think there'll be a few changes because it's going to be pretty tight, the schedule at the minute. Obviously, we've just had an international break, but it's league game, Europa League, league game, Europa League. It's pretty flat out. So he's going to try and manage players, I think, across the whole period, and certainly games at Ibrox is when he's maybe got this best chance to do that. Livingston obviously is one of the 2 teams that Rangers have dropped points to this season. Obviously, they're a slightly different entity at home normally, and I think they lost to Kilmarnock 3-1 last weekend. So, yeah, I think they're a team that Rangers can get at and should be able to beat without the strongest side, say, that is maybe what he felt that he picked for the Celtic game.
Nikola Katic is going to be the only confirmed injury absence so far. Phil Helander can have a small knock, we believe, going into the Liège game, where Borna Barisic came off shortly before half-time after picking up a knock. Gerrard has said this morning, Friday, that he's a doubt for a Livingston clash. He's going to have a scan and whatnot, so it looks as though he might miss out. But kind of as things sit, he is still in contention, but we'll kind of get to that once we come here. Now, first of all, goalkeepers. Alan McGregor's been, for want of a better word, the undisputed number 1, even allowing for the games that he missed at the start of the season through injury. It's a straight shootout between him and John McLaughlin for the gloves on Sunday. And for me, I think McGregor's the obvious pick. He seems to have re-established himself. He's back in the side. He's fit. And, it seems kind of clear that he is the one that Gerrard prefers over the other. Do you agree with that, or do you think McLaughlin could come in?
Yeah, he is back to being number 1 now after that sort of wee bit of limbo period he was in with the injuries, and then a couple of appearances on the bench while McLaughlin's sort of incredible clean sheet record sort of rumbled on. But yeah, as soon as he conceded in the Hibs game, I think it was pretty obvious that it was going to change, or not pretty obvious, but likely that it was going to change after that. And yeah, I think it's going to be something that we see though across the season, that he's made it clear, Gerrard, that he wants to keep both keepers fresh at all times, but fresh and also engaged, and sort of not going for long periods without games. So there will be times when he changes it, and McLaughlin will probably get a game before the next international break. I would be a little bit surprised if it was this weekend though, because the fact that McGregor has played 2 games he had his own break with the internationals, and he's played 2 games, he still hasn't had to make a save. So he can't really contest that he's been overworked in that period. So yeah, I think he could. I think he will start on Sunday, and then McLaughlin might play against Poznan or something on the Thursday.
Now, on the Poznan bit, just for you saying, I don't think he'll play McLaughlin against Poznan, only because McGregor's approaching European record. So I think it may have to depend on domestic games.
Well, I think it's Kilmarnock after that, which will be McGregor, I think, because that's a really important one that in a place that Rangers have slipped up in the past. But I think probably with Barisic, a question mark, Helander, a question mark, he'll go with what he knows best in terms of McGregor at the weekend.
Yeah. Now, moving up to the back four, two of these four immediately pick themselves for me. And if everyone was 100% fit, 4 out of the 4 would have automatically picked themselves. But as it is, we've got James Tavernier will 100% start, barring injury between now and kick-off on Sunday. He'll line up at right back, and beside him, Connor Goldson will be the right-sided centre-back. The next two, however, there is, as you mentioned, there's slight question marks over Phil Helander and Borna Barisic. I think just looking at Gerrard's quotes, both after the Liège game and again on Friday morning, I think it's probably safe to say that he won't gamble on Barisic. I think he'll give Bassey a start. It's relatively risk-free, or low risk anyway, with it being a home game at Ibrox against a side who, with the greatest respect to Livingston, aren't in the best form just now. They're not one that's renowned for going away from the Tony Macaroni and being a really expansive side who go and take the game to their opposition. So I think Bassey will take the left back slot, and it just leaves that other position in centre back. If Helander's fit and ready to go, Helander starts for me every day of the week. I think he's shown this season that him and Connor Goldson are the best, not just pairing at the club, but I think they're the best defensive pairing in the country just now. I don't think there's anybody that comes close to just how well those two seem to mesh together. Goldson's strengths really play into Helander's strengths. And conversely, where Helander's really good, it covers up for areas where Goldson's maybe not quite so good. Whereas I think Goldson and Balogun are a bit too similar. Both like to come forward with the ball, both like to kind of try and play those kind of long raking passes. So I think just with all things being equal, it would always be Goldson and Helander starting. But this weekend, do you think Balogun gets a nod just to give Helander a little bit of chance to kind of recuperate and recharge his batteries?
Yeah, I think so. I'm sort of thinking that'll probably be Balogun, and sometimes Gerrard, I think, will be happy with that, almost to go with Balogun for these sorts of home games against theoretically weaker opposition when Rangers are going to have a lot of the ball because of that. Yes, that say in the Old Firm, you could see a lot that it was Goldson that was taking it upon himself to play the balls from the back. He was the one. If it was going to come from centre back, it was coming from him. And Helander's more comfortable just playing the square pass to him to then release others. Whereas I think, you have options from both sides. If you have Goldson and Balogun in the same team in an attacking sense, it just makes sense as well to just carry over that sort of a bit of continuity from the game, because realistically Bassey played the majority of the match after Barisic went off injured, and obviously Balogun played it as well. So if Helander's carrying a knock and Gerrard felt there was no need to risk him against Liège on Thursday, it's unlikely he's going to be absolutely fine to go on the Sunday. So you give him another, if he doesn't play, you're giving him a week really to get over whatever it is before the Poznan game. So yeah, I think Balogun, and it offers a little bit more going forward. And then Bassey, hopefully from a Rangers perspective, Barisic isn't out for a long period, but they can certainly cope with him not being there in the short term, with given how impressive Bassey's been.
So moving on to the midfield three, this is for me it's the strongest area of the team. You look at the options that Gerrard's got there just now, and he's spoiled for choice. But Ryan Jack, Scott Arfield, Stephen Davis, Glenn Kamara, we've got Bongani Zungu still to come in. We've got Joe Aribo, who is, if he's not ready to start this weekend, he'll be ready to start by the Poznan game, I would expect. So there's a real kind of dilemma for Gerrard, and first of all, the personnel that he selects, but secondly, how that three kind of all tend to interact during games. I think we've seen before that when he's played the trio with Jack, Kamara and Davis, it can be a bit of a muchness at times. Kind of three midfielders who like to play a similar style of football. They're not necessarily ones who are prone to kind of going beyond the attackers and making themselves available in the box. So for me, that tends to lead towards Scott Arfield, who we've seen the last 7 or 8 games that he loves that stuff. You know, he's added some real energy and just extra legs to the Rangers midfield that tends to have been lacking the last wee while. So, I mean, for me, I think it's going to be a largely similar trio to last night. I think you might see Stephen Davis come in at the expense of Ryan Jack or Glenn Kamara. But I think one of those two and Scott Arfield are absolutely nailed on starters to begin with. And it then becomes who the third man is.
Yeah, the lineup, sort of the way, the composition of the midfield in the Old Firm was really impressive with, Arfield sort of sitting on the right, Davis as that pivot, and then Kamara on the left, who was sort of happy to work up and down and cover Barisic's runs at left back. And I think that worked really well. And yes, there's going to be tweaks to that across the season, but that was a big decision, the selection point there to leave Jack out. But after leaving him out and then coming in and doing really well, which I think was predictable, that he'd be motivated and would come in and do well. I think he'll stay on the side, and it'll simply be at this point, it'll just be a case of who's played the most minutes, and we'll give them a rest. And so for me, that is just Kamara. He's played the games since the international break, but also played 3 times for Finland while he was away, and has put in a massive shift over that time. Even though he looks like he's barely breaking into a run half the time because he's so good on the ball. But I think he would drop out, and you've probably have Arfield still on that slightly, the right-hand side of the trio. And then it's probably I'd say Davis maybe slots into the sort of the pivot role, and Jack maybe moves slightly forward and onto the left because maybe he has a bit more legs to cover Bassey at left back.
Well, that was just what I was going to mention there. If Bassey does indeed start at left back, do you think that changes how Gerrard looks to shape his midfield? We've seen Glenn Kamara's pretty adept at filling in at left back slot, and it tends to be his role. When Barisic gets forwards, you'll see Kamara drops into left back, and whether it's Jack or Arfield, they drop into right back, or even Davis drops into right back when Tavernier goes. So it leaves me wondering that if he does go with Calvin Bassey, who, as much as he's impressed in his handful of appearances, it is still somewhat of an unknown quantity. Do you kind of take that slightly safer option in Kamara, just to give you that little bit more defensive security when he does go forward? Or do you leave it with Jack, who naturally is kind of more suited on the other side of the pitch?
Well, I think it's an interesting question, but I think at Motherwell, when Bassey started, he sort of tried to, as he said, flatten out the back four slightly and have that, the fact that basically Tav and Barisic are just given complete license to be the furthest forward player on the pitch, essentially, when they see a chance to get forward on their one side. So Bassey may be restricted and told that only on the very odd occasion will he be allowed to do that. Just basically because of the composition of the team. But I would sort of go the other way, because considering it's at home as well, I think you don't need Kamara as much as you did at Celtic Park, because you need that man to drop in otherwise. And part of the reason for that was Frimpong, who's going to be bombing down the right side himself. You're not going to have that necessarily against Livingston, or that sort of will from them to get forward quite so often. So I think maybe a slightly more conservative role for Bassey. But and I take your point that Jack is probably slightly more suited to playing on the right side, but he could also well do that and Arfield shift over, because the main thing for Arfield is not necessarily the side he's on, but it's the work that he does up and down, because when he gets to the final third, he could be central, he could be on either side, and he just likes to link the play in there. So I think it'll be Jack and Arfield either side of Davis as sort of the pivot in the middle.
Yeah, I think we'll go with that. So that takes us to the front three. Ryan Kent, automatic pick again. Another one whose form this season pretty much dictates that he's going to be in the starting 11 if fit. Beside him, or on the other flank, it's been a bit more fluid this season. Yanis Hadji came back in against Standard Liège. We've seen Brandon Barker there, we've seen Jordan Jones there. We've even seen Scott Arfield there on occasion. Greg Stewart can slot in there. Plenty of options. But Gerrard does seem to kind of have an idea of how he wants that role to be filled. So do you think we see again a similar front three to what we saw in Liège with Kent and Hadji supporting Morelos? Or is it a bit more change up front? Because as much as I can see Kent and Hadji both starting, I'm struggling to see Alfredo Morelos in the starting 11 this weekend.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't think he's done himself any favours. I think I wasn't hugely impressed with how he did against Celtic. You thought there was maybe a bit more to his display. I thought he was poor last night. A couple of during the Liège game, I think there was just a couple of chances where things failed to him. He was played in situations. There was one that opened up in the first half that he clearly should have just taken a touch and got shot off, and he tried to give it back to Arfield, which was completely unlike him. And then in other situations, he took on a shot when basically there was an open net for Ryan Kent if he'd squared it. Another one where he just fluffed his lines, and his hold-up play was poor. And I think it's an interesting one because obviously Gerrard has come out before and said, look, his head's gone, basically, with the transfer interest, and that's now not really a factor, although like the transfer window in Qatar and all that's open if you believe any of those links. But I think it's just his focus is maybe there, but it's just not there in terms of form, and that's 6 games now without a goal. So Rangers spent money on 2 strikers in the summer, and there's no way the board sanctioned those moves with a view to both Roof and it and just sitting on the bench for prolonged periods. So I think Roof has obviously done himself no harm with his absolute worldly against Standard, but the thing with that is as well, if you're an outsider, it's like CNN I saw were covering it being like, is this the best goal of all time? And then if you're just some outsider and you look at Rangers team at the weekend, he's not starting, you'd be up in arms. But it's pretty clear from what Gerrard said that he's not ready yet, so he's likely to come off the bench. But I think Itten should start. He scored that brace against Motherwell off the bench. He's not really been given a full run yet, and Morelos has 6 games in the trot, 6 starts I think it is, and he's drawn a blank. So it's time for him to get a go. And then over on the right side, he's got so many chances or choices. It's incredible, really, when you think about what he's had before. So yeah, there's several. I'm not sure how we're going to be able to write a team down in this because I can't decide between about 3. I think Hadji has a chance. I also think he will feel like he almost owes Jordan Jones a start as well, because he obviously did so well against Motherwell. Started against Ross County, didn't do as much, but was left out of the Europa League squad, which is a big blow for him. Perhaps with the idea that when Rangers come back after Europa League duty, he'll be fresh and ready to go at teams on a Sunday. Now, Livingston sitting in against Rangers at Ibrox is probably not ideal for his playing style. He's going to like to get that space in behind. So I think if it was an away game, he would start, because at home, maybe not. You've got a Rebo who's had a couple of minutes off the bench, and then, 20 odd in Belgium. Is he ready to start just to give him 60 minutes? Start the game and let him do his thing, but don't push him too far. Rebo is the best option for me if he is fit enough to play. But yeah, you've got Brandon Barker there. He obviously didn't do himself any favours really in the Old Firm, but he's got 4 or 5 options, and it's a bit of a toss-up. So what are you thinking?
I think it's going to... in terms of the strongest side, it would be Hadji for me every time, but I've got a feeling that there's one eye on the Poznan game next week. And there's been times where I think Gerrard's shown almost a kind of lack of trust in Hadji at certain times, whether it's his work rate or whether it's just his kind of all-round application. There's sometimes you get the feeling that Gerrard doesn't quite... He sees him as a luxury at times, for want of a better word. So I can see Hadji come out of the side this weekend. In terms of who comes in for him, Jordan Jones seems the obvious one, simply down to the fact that Brandon Barker had an absolute abomination against Celtic. I thought it was abysmal. And I know some people have kind of tried to defend him, but I thought it was one of the most half-arsed displays I've seen in an Old Firm game for Rangers player in a long, long time. He just looked like he was going through the motions. And for me, that kind of takes him out of contention for the Livingston game. There is the one slight curveball, though, that Gerrard could throw that I've kind of played with a little bit. And I don't know. Possibly playing Jermaine Defoe centrally, because he's somebody who's largely just kind of fallen out the picture and been forgotten a little bit.
Yeah.
And playing Cedric Kitten out wide. But with Defoe's complete lack of minutes so far this season, I think he's got a couple under his belt at best. It's hard to really to see him come into the starting 11. So I do think he'll go with it centrally and put Jordan Jones wide right, despite it probably not being a game that ultimately suits Jones. And as you says, he is someone that having that space in behind defences to get into and kind of stretch his leg, it suits him much more than playing against a team who we can probably guarantee just now will come to Ibrox and will set up in two banks of five and will bravely look to get out their own half. So it's going to be a frustrating one for Jones. But conversely, it's also an opportunity for him to really show that despite not being in the Europa League squad, he does deserve regular domestic minutes. Because it's that opportunity for him to show, well, this is what he's a miss in Europe, but this is what I can do in the league, so why are you not going to play me in these games? And it's a real opportunity for him to kind of just to show what he can do, and that it's probably fair to say that he burnt his bridges a little bit with his first season at Ibrox, his red card and his Old Firm debut, and his injury and everything that came with that. And he's almost had to start from scratch to prove himself to Gerrard and the coaching team. So yeah, Livingston would be the perfect chance for him to do that, but I'm not convinced it's a game that you would see the best out of him from.
Yeah, I think we can go along with that then. I'm fairly happy with that. And I think as a point, you look at that 11 and think that's should be a strong enough team to beat Livingston, but you can also then turn to the bench. And if that is the team, you can turn to a bench with Morelos, Roof, Defoe, Aribo, Hadji, Kamara, potentially Helander, John McLaughlin. It's an incredible bench to have, and then it's also
Sean Walsh and Russell Martin,
yeah, it's like it's a real difference to that era, but also just a couple of years ago when it. What's that?
Even last season, it's a big jump compared to the benches that you would see last season.
Well, you think of the time as well when it was basically Morelos or Lafferty, and Lafferty had almost, by his own admission, after he left, given up because he had thought to himself he wasn't getting any minutes. So it was Morelos or bust. And then after Christmas last year, it was Morelos or bust because Defoe was injured. Morelos wasn't scoring any goals. But now you have that option to take them out of the team and still have others as well waiting in the wings, especially if you're playing one up front. But those options are fantastic, and it's something that Rangers need to capitalise on now. The fact that it's just Katic out injured, because he's a guy that they basically directly replaced in the squad with Balogun anyway. So in terms of the actual numbers and the playing staff, they're not really down anyone other than potentially Barisic and Helander with this knock at the weekend. But yeah, it's really, really impressive that sort of depth, and the fact that it's pretty rare if you're at this stage in the season and you're not really nursing injury problems, and it's something that Rangers need to make sure they take maximum points from the next while and go on a little run while they have this, because they've got no players self-isolating, no real major injury concerns, and they need to benefit on that because it won't be the case at other times.
Fantastic. So just to go back through the now completed 11, we've got Alan McGregor in goals, James Tavernier, Connor Goldson, Leon Balogun and Calvin Bassett in the back five. Scott Arfield, Stephen Davis and Ryan Jack in the midfield three. And then Ryan Kent, Jordan Jones and Cedric Itten leading the line. So we think that's pretty much going to be it this weekend.
Yeah, I think that's a strong team and a good use of the resources that he's sort of got at his disposal.
Fantastic. Well, now we've kind of got to the end of that. That's enough for this episode. If you disagree or you agree with our starting 11, let us know in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.